afternoon, everybody. I have to confess that this session has at least 3 challenges. First, it's immediately after lunch, so it's the most sleepy time of the day. And second, lack of diversity. We're all Japanese men, and 3 of us are from Kyoto University, and Kentaro was born on the exactly same day as me. Yeah, September 1985. So, lack of diversity. Actually, there were supposed to be 2 more panelists, but 2 of them unfortunately couldn't make it for some urgent, inevitable reasons. So it is very unfortunate, but anyways, yeah. So we are 4. And the third challenge is the title of this session: Agile Governance, New Governance Model to Address Society 5.0. What is that? It's so, non-familiar words. So Tatsu will explain the details later, but we have to think about something different from traditional governance model, traditional framework. So in order to overcome these challenges, I really want you to join our conversation. So I want to make it more interactive session rather than just we are speaking here. So let me introduce brilliant panelists. Professor Tetsuya Yamashita, would you like to say something?
I'm Tetsuya Yamashita from Kyoto University. I'm a professor of law, especially corporate law and insurance law.
Yeah, perfect. And Professor Tetsuhiko Inatani.
Hi everyone, I'm Tatsuhiko Inatani, just call me Tatsu. I'm a professor of law, also he's my colleague, law at Kyoto University and graduate school law. And my specialization is originally in corporate crime, so my specialization is originally very strongly tied with this event. But now gradually I treat the matter of companies which treat the high-tech and emerging technologies, including AIs, robots, or something like that. Then I, expands my specialties to include the incentive structure, to setting up incentive structure for such companies to control the risks and the benefits of the products of these companies by themselves. So that is my specialization. And finally, I'm in charge of some of the government member committee, which now is proposing the digital the policy and law, which try to promote the digital transformation of Japanese government. So now my specialization is expands to tech policy, and maybe which has a connection into the POT. So anyway, I try to keep you awake as possible as I can. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Kentaro Asai.
Hi, my name is Kentaro Asai. I'm assistant professor from Australian National University, College of Business and Economics. And first of all, I really like to thank you, Mr. Fukamizu, for inviting me to this wonderful workshop, and I'm particularly looking forward to attending this session for Agile Governance. My expertise is corporate studies, banking, and industrial organization, and behavior studies. And particularly, I'm very interested in the intersection of law and economics. So I always enjoy this workshop because whenever I attend this workshop, I learn something new. And so I would like to return my microphone to the moderator, Kasa.
Thank you very much. And so before starting our discussion, just let me briefly introduce what is this session about. So in this morning, we discussed about wrongdoings or misconduct by human beings. But in a society which is based on cyber-physical systems, more decisions will be made by machines, typically by AI and algorithms. And sometimes they also do some wrongdoing and misconduct. And how to think about the governance of those systems, and also how to monitor the activity of systems, or how to incentivize the operators or developers of the systems to do good governance, and also how to compensate damages derived from super complex systems would be our new question, the new questions for our digitalized society. So first of all, Tatsuo will explain the concept of Society 5.0 and governance challenges, which is derived from physical systems. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as Hiroki excellently connects the temas with today's events, so we treat the governance system which try to address the risk made by the mistakes by the machines or AIs. So the first, I'd like to introduce the new governance concept. It is called Agile governance, and actually it is adopted as formal policy by Japanese government to promote their digitalization. So I start with the concept of Society 5.0, which is maybe not so familiar concept, especially for the colleagues from the US. So the Society 5.0 is the human-centered society that achieves both solutions to social issues and economic growth through a system that integrates cyberspace and physical space. So it is called, and we call cyber physical systems as CPS. And for example, the CPS is like the autonomous driving systems, automated flying systems, or some other automated systems, which actually uses physical components as a machine that try to correct the information from the IoT devices, and these informations are exchanges through the cyberspaces, and some informational decision processes operated by AIs or some other algorithms, and then decides the behavior of the physical spaces. So this kind of CPS will be proliferated in Japanese society. Actually, the Society 5.0 is envisioned society, envisioned ideal figure of Japanese society proposed by the Japanese cabinet. And as I mentioned, and Hiroki kindly mentioned, so the CPS incorporates AI, which has the property of learning from data and statistically optimizing its behavior as a component of the system in various ways. And so it imparts a dynamic nature to the system. And in CPS, everything is connected and cooperates with each other to achieve functional objectives. So you may see the right side down of the slides, so you can find the smart city. So in smart city, many CPSs are interconnected, and it operates with each other to achieve its functional purposes, like keeping people's health better, or respond quickly to the natural disasters to make the city more resilient, or some other, or so on and so on. So, and that these kinds of connecting systems then gave birth to a system of systems. So it is a very complex system, because its component itself is a complex system. So the systems of systems emerges in which the complex system itself is a component. And so the optimal balance of benefits and risk from innovation using this dynamic and complex system is an issue. It is the Japanese urgent issues. And I think that our government has a relatively different ideal figure from the US government. I mean, so our government starts their basic, our government set the theoretical foundation, which is transplanted from the European civil countries. And so we are more like legal reasons. We are more, we more prefer as a centralized government systems. And so it may, not fit well with the situation caused by the Society 5.0. So I explain briefly about this. So in Japan, the ideal form of a conventional governance system is legalism, based on the kinds of constructivist rationalism, in which the central government presents a law that balances benefits and risks in advance by law. That in a dynamic and complex regulatory environment, including, of course, Society 5.0, informational asymmetry is significant, and regulatory obsolescence is likely to occur. So instead of the government balancing benefits and risks in centralized manner, a mechanism is needed to balance benefits and risks in a decentralized and prompt manner. That is our main challenges from the Society 5.0. And so we propose a kind of novel governance system, which is called Agile governance. And actually, as I mentioned, this is adopted by Japanese government, but as well as Singaporean governments or UAE governments or the UK also adopts this concept. And actually, this concept is also promoted by the World Economic Forum and as well as the OECD or some other international organizations. Anyway, so Agile governance is a system of governance in which the benefits and risks that the CPS entails are quickly and continuously balanced responsibly by the entities themselves who develop and deliver the CPS. So this is actually our version of the Agile governance. So instead of centralized governments try to control or try to, make a good balance between the risk and benefits of the CPS, we delegate the private corporation which actually develops and operates these systems to balance the risk and benefits by themselves. But to do so, we need more good incentive structure that may be connected to today's event. But anyway, so I go forward. And if this kind of governance system is, just adapted recklessly, then we may face a collapse. Because as we know, the private sectors may be driven by their own economic incentives and don't care about anything about their profits. And maybe that may conflict each other because the system of systems needs to cooperation among the stakeholders to address the risks which emerges through the interaction of the components. But if there is no chance for such cooperation, then the system as itself may be collapsed. And so we also introduce a multi-stakeholder approach that spans multiple layers we adopt to increase the social acceptability of the balance between benefits and risks and manage the function of the complex system holistically. So I mean, we try to, adapt both agile and democratic and critically, evaluate the conceived systems. And so we adapt the multi-stakeholder approach as well as the agile response approach. That if we seriously take account in the multi-stakeholder approach, it sometimes risk to slow the governance cycles. And so we set multi-layers. So basically the most basic layer, it may relates to the algorithms or codes which directly influences the behavior of CPS. And maybe this is this kind of behavior may be identified through the multi-stakeholder approach. In this case, stakeholders may be for example, if I use the example of the drone case, then maybe the locals of the areas where the drones operates or something like that. That's this kind of drone system, but this kind of systems necessary to interoperate with other systems. And so then we set another layer of the multi-stakeholder approach where the operators or developers themselves can operate. And then we may set legislation levels and constitutional levels and so on and so on. So anyway, so we set multi-stakeholder approach which spans the multi-layers and try to set the agile governance as possible as democratic and democratic. And the companies that develop and apply CPS are responsible for balancing the benefits and risks of the CPS they offer, communicating with relevant stakeholders as necessary to ensure responsible innovation. And so, agile governance is a mechanism for collective innovation governance. It is, I think, a very unique feature of the Japanese governance systems, because I think many of governance systems proposed by the other countries to address these kind of problems, they try to, set up more distributed and just bottom-up approach to, respond to the risks that generates by the systems quickly. But we try to, control the risk with the cooperation with of the stakeholders. And so our systems, like Lewis, had a correct text. And as I mentioned, we have to set the good incentive structure. And so we have to propose some amendments to the library rules. And actually, we are now discussing about these amendments in our government with many experts. And so this is about the ongoing discussion. So, first of all, I make it clear again, so to make Agile governance work, a library rule that incentivizes companies to balance the benefits and risks of CPS on their own is necessary. And characteristics of AI as typified by deep learning. So because of probabilistic behavior based on statistical learning, developers and operators can recognize that there is a certain probability of behavior that has serious effects, but they cannot foresee exactly how it occurs. We are called known unknowns in engineering areas. I mean, so do you know that deep learning is very good to identify or classify, for example, the cat's figure. But based on the learning of the cat's figure data, they have to set up the best algorithms to optimal algorithms to identify what is cat and what is not cat. But they still have behaved statistically or probabilistically. I mean, there is no perfect solution to avoid misidentification because this machine learning is based on the statistical learning. And so the developers can understand that, or can, how to say, perceive that there is a certain risk which leads to the, how to say, the undesirable event based on the misidentification of the, for example, figure of cats. But how concretely it happens is, I mean, so they cannot foresee exactly how it occurs. So they can't identify in other words which cat figure may be misclassified as like dog or some other apples or something like that. So that is very tricky situation because our at least in Japanese systems, our library system is based on basically two concepts. One is negligence and one is defect. And actually, for example, the concept of defect assumes that. So if we can remove the defect, then we can make very safe products. I mean, if we apply this concept to this the concept to the context of AI, then we face very serious problems because there is no solution to remove the defect, remove the cause of the misidentification because AI naturally behaves probabilistically. But of course, we may set actually the standard to develop the AI instead of remove this kind instead of requires the remove of this kind of risk from the AI products. But setting this kind of how to say standard is also problematic if given the situation that the technology is rapidly developed and often the regulators faces information asymmetry. Regulators, not only regulators, but as well the court may face information asymmetrically. And actually, if the court may how to say decide the case correctly at some point, but and impose some how to say duty to improve the quality of the AI products, but this kind of duty may quickly become obsolete because the technology develops so rapid. And so this kind of concept is very difficult to apply in this context. So our proposal is, first of all, we should set a strict library regime because strict library regime has many advantages over the negligence-based or duty-based liabilities in this context because the governments and the courts do not have to establish a duty to act because the incentive is created for the developer and operators of CPS to balance the compensation costs arising from the accident with the costs arising from measures to reduce the probability of accidents marginally. And so, once we set the strict liability regime, then we don't have to care how to set a duty which is imposed on the manufacturer or developers. But this strict liability regime has another problem, maybe bring another problems into the picture. Because, okay, so if the situation is very static, strict liability rules works very well, I think. Because company can identify what may causes a risk and what is a good measures to reduce the risk in advance. But the situation is very dynamic. Then the companies there is a case where the company cannot identify what is a risk, even if they conduct their sincere risk management in terms of research on risks. And sometimes CPS generates a risk that are generated by the introduction of each systems. And it is very difficult for each individual CPS developer or operators to recognize and foresee such kind of risks, because the risk emerges with introduction of other operators, and so it is very difficult for them to foresee. So, this is called unknown and unknown. So, given the existence of unknown and unknown, we have to consider about the exception to the strict liability rules. If we don't set the strict liability rules, then maybe we face the excessive risk aversion of the companies. And so, in order to prevent excessive risk aversion, a system is needed to exempt risks that are deemed impossible to recognize their existence during the development operation stage, even if appropriate risk search is conducted. So, we set strict liability rule as a basic rule with some exception rule. That is our strategy. But this kinds of regime is maybe the nest for moral hazard of the companies. And so we have to set another regime which prevents the moral hazard of the companies. And so we would like to set another sanction systems to prevent one. But before entering these issues, I would like to quickly explain the situation about the Japanese criminal law in this context. So, Japanese criminal law, basically in this context, applicable if we found the negligence of the individual employees who belongs to the company which develops the AI products or some other cutting-edge technologies. But the negligence is very difficult to especially the individual negligence-based liability is very difficult to operate in this context, because there is a huge information asymmetry between the prosecutor and the company. If company does not cooperate with prosecutors or other authorities, there is no chance to identify whether there is a risk, whether there is a wrongdoers or not. And especially in the case of the global company, I mean some high-tech companies, some high-tech, very sophisticated high-tech company located on the US, and they are not normally so, cooperative with other countries' authorities. And so if some accident happens, and maybe it is generated by negligence or some other wrongdoings by the employees of such kind of companies, then Japanese prosecutors have no resource or no chance to detect these wrongdoers and to prosecute it. So that is another problem. And so our solution is solution to the moral hazard of cooperation in terms of exemption regime, and to identify the wrongdoers if it exists in each countries. We would like to introduce the Japanese version of DPA. So introduce a sanction system based on a strict liability for companies that develops and operate products and services using CPS for accidents caused by such products and services. Then establish a special procedure to defer prosecution on the condition of providing the authorities and the accident investigation committee with necessary information on the accident, cooperating with investigations regarding the malicious individuals, fulfilling responsibility for compensation to the victims, and necessary corporate restructuring. If necessary, the agreement can include improvement of the product or service itself in cooperation with accent investigation, a committee consisting of experts. So if we can establish this kind of structure, then the picture changes. So because the companies whose products causes accident, then have to provide the necessary information to the authorities if they would like to avoid the prosecutions. And based on the provided information, then the authorities can identify that this company actually implemented sincere risk research and could not find this risk, or the risk is actually identifiable by the company, and so they have to pay the compensation or something like that. And so this is, I think, one of the promising resolution to these kinds of situations. But taking into consideration the difference in purpose and nature of the conventional criminal litigation and the tension with the should principle. So should principle is a German term. So actually, Japanese criminal law is influenced by the German criminal law theory so heavily. And so we mainly put our purpose of the criminal law for retribution to the individual who commits a crime. But in this context, DPA is actually the legal practical tool to extract the necessary corporate behavior, which is, how to say, more forward-looking one. And so this character is so different. And so I think a novel sanction system will be introduced separately from the current criminal justice system, with a different body from the public prosecutor's office or the enforcement body. But if so, it is problematic for the public prosecutor's office in terms of prosecuting the wrongdoers if wrongdoers are identified. And so, in doing so, prosecutor guidelines should be developed only to prosecute the agent who is accused by the new enforcement body. I mean, so this new enforcement body collects the information provided by the company and examine the information, and if it may identify some wrongdoers, then this body accuse the wrongdoers and pass the ball to the prosecutor's office. That is, I think, our strategy. So, a little bit complicated story in a very sleepy time, I'm very sorry. But then if we visualize the systems, then it is like this. So, actually, companies by themselves engage in cost-benefit analysis, and accident happens, then provide information or not, and if then they don't provide information, and they face severe fines and the revocation of certification perhaps. And if they provide information, and if the risk is identifiable for them in the past, then they should compensate. But if they don't obey the law and they don't compensate, then they again face the serious sanctions. And if the given information provided by the company, the risk is not identifiable, given the necessary implementation of the risk search, then their exemption rules is applied, and so they don't have to pay any money. But they have to, cooperate with the committee to improve their systems maybe. And sometimes, and I think in this case, actually the victims are left not compensated. And so we have to establish another regime to rescue these victims. That is public compensation and insurance assistance. And I think Tetsuya and my colleagues will dig this tema into more detail. So, thank you. This is my presentation.
Thank you very much. So a lot of information in 30 minutes. So let me just summarize what you talked, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So first you started talking about how our society is changing. So now our society is connected and based on several physical systems. which brings a lot of information gap and also which changes in a very fast manner. So that's why we need, instead of command and control vertical governance systems, we need more agile, multi-stakeholder distributed and collective governance model. So that was about the And then you mentioned like we maybe have to change the incentive mechanisms so that the agile governance framework work. And the first problem or liability system is so you will need either negligence or defect of the services or products. But what we consider about the AI systems, it behaves in a statistical manner. So court cannot decide which is what is neglect or what is defect. So maybe we should start from talking about strict liability, but there is always unknown. So how to deal with unknowns? So that was the next point. And for unknowns, maybe we shouldn't punish the companies because it's not their fault. But in order to identify the risks and in order to identify whether it was really unknown, you need more information. So then you need the incentive mechanism for the companies to bring more information.
Exactly.
Like we discussed in the morning. Right? Then one of the options was DPA, Deferred Prosecution Agreement. And if it stands, then how about, so if the company was not prosecuted or not, if the company doesn't have any liability, then how to remedy the victims is the next question. But it's going to be discussed by Tetsuya later, right?
Thank you for excellent research.
Okay, so now I hope we are on the same stage. So, and Kentaro, you're an economist, so do you have any comments from the perspective of economist?
Yeah, sure. So in my role as a discussant for Katsu's presentation, so I'd like to briefly review two key features of Katsu's proposal, which is interesting the economist view for agile governance of innovations. And next, I will raise two questions for each feature. And the last question is about insurance program and how to incentivize the fund to choose optimal behavior. So, but still, let me first talk about the first feature of the proposed governance system, which is dynamic and updatable regulation, which influences each stakeholder on the CPS. And because the benefits and risks of innovations change over time, the optimal behavior of each stakeholder should also change over time. In order to induce this change, regulation influencing each stakeholder also needs to keep being updated and changing. And although not clearly mentioned, in my understanding, Katsu's proposal implicitly suggests a regulator or its stakeholder influenced by regulation should exploit digital technology for their governance and self-control. Specifically because every stakeholder is electronically connected on the CPS, we can use a computer program or a smart contract to achieve complex transactions between multiple stakeholders. And that, of course, that are contingent on changing states over time. So I'd like to highly appreciate that Katsu proposes an ambitious but technologically feasible system. Therefore, my questions are not about the technological feasibility of a system, but about the incentive and approval process for updating system. And specifically, my first question is how to incentivize the update of a system. And of course, the first option I could think of is monetary reward, like a bug bounty system where a developer who found bug or who wants to update will receive some monetary rewards. And I think that type of incentive scheme should be helpful. But at the same time, I'm a bit worried about free riding issue. I think the key feature of this system is its decentralized nature. So there are many stakeholders on the system. Therefore, even if one stakeholder tries to update the system, it is costly relative to its benefit. Then naturally, the member could think that, well, maybe the other member could update the system. So that creates a free riding incentive. So I think eventually what we need is to nurture good community culture within the CTS such that every stakeholder on the system shares a goal and communicates with each other for collective innovations. So I think this is sort of like a similar to develop nice corporate culture, which was discussed in the earlier session. And in other words, actually, this is maybe the question of what would be the optimal boundary of the system or community. Probably the optimal boundary of a community is such that its member has a good incentive to keep upgrading and change the system. And I think this actually idea is coming from recent theory of a fund written by Gautam from Yale University and his author. So that's my first two questions related to the first feature. And the second feature, which might be more relevant for this conference, is that it is a regulation that sort of admits the negligence of risks in order to balance the risks and benefits of innovations. And balancing risks and benefits is efficient and very intuitive for an economist. Specifically, in order to improve the performance of a product in the future, trials and errors or learning by doing today is essential and necessary, particularly for the realization of innovations. So this means a regulator needs to allow an innovator to intentionally sort of dismiss risks for the improved performance in the future. And this principle is very natural and it's sort of like a typical dynamic programming program for economists, but I found from Tatsu that justifying this principle is not easy in law. If strict liability is used on the innovator needs to be punished for every accident caused by a product, which discourages necessary risk-taking and sacrifices the improved performance of a product in the future. But if no liability is imposed, an innovator is going to be never punished for an accident caused by a product, which leads to more hazard incentive. So Tatsu creatively overcomes this dilemma by combining DPA with forcing an innovator to purchase liability insurance. Through DPA, an innovator is still subject to strict liability, which minimizes more hazard incentives, whereas a regulator is able to weaken or cancel punishment if necessary, which minimizes inefficient risk aversion. Moreover, in my understanding, in exchange for leniency, a regulator is able to acquire private information from an innovator, and which actually improves and further improves the efficiency of regulation. And finally, forcing an innovator to purchase liability insurance ensures that the victim of an accident fully receives compensation, so which resolves the limited liability problem of punishment. So overall, this scheme is great, but because I need to enrich the kind of discussion of this panel, so I would like to raise two questions related to the pricing of a liability insurance, because you say you want to use insurance for payment to the victim of accident. So my first question is how to acquire private information for risk-sensitive premium. So in my understanding, in order to use insurance for disciplining device, the premium, which is the price of the insurance, has to be sensitive to the risk of a product or a fund. And in order to make the premium contingent on the risk, you need the information. So in this context, insurers have to acquire private information about a product or a fund. So I'm wondering, because through DPA, a regulator is able to acquire private information about the product or a fund. So such information can be shared with insurers or not. And if it is possible, I think risk-sensitive premium is feasible. So I'm really interested in this possibility because our panelists specialize in these fields, and particularly Professor Yamashita is expert in insurance. And my second question is how to resolve commitment issue. So even if risk-sensitive premium is feasible, the question is whether insurer is willing to raise premium for a fund who made an accident. For example, suppose the insurer is worried about that fund becoming a future customer. Then insurer may not be willing to raise premium for a fund who is already suffering from making an accident in response to the accident. So such sort of reputational concerns may be held by insurers. And in that case, even if insurers are willing to commit to risk-sensitive premium, but they may not be able to commit to doing so eventually. So I'm interested in how we could resolve such a commitment issue. And I strongly believe next Professor Yamashita will elaborate on insurance issue in Japan. And I'd like to return my microphone to moderator.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So before asking Tatsu to answer the question, maybe Tatsu, you can explore more about insurance mechanisms.
Okay, I would like to introduce the issues on insurance in Agile governance. So let's review the civil liability regime proposed in the Agile governance system. In proposed civil liability regime, in principle, developers and operators of CPS owe strict liability on damages arising from accidents caused by systems of CPS. There is an exception of that. If a risk which caused the damage was unknown, which can hardly be recognized and foreseen in advance, the liability of the developers and operators should be exempted. Besides, there is a necessity of insurance and public compensation. Based on such liability regime, the developers and operators should have enough assets or buy insurance to pay the compensation to the victims. To secure enough funds for the compensation, there is an option to introduce compulsory insurance for not large firms, so the firms who don't have enough fund assets. On the other hand, when risk causing damages was unknown one, the developers and operators can be exempted from owing their liability. Then, would the victims bear the damages? No. If so, people would oppose to introduce such CPS work. So, who should take such a risk? The answer is all citizens or society as a whole. That means that the public compensation system should be introduced. So, in order to understand this regime deeply, I would like to compare it with the current liability regimes in Japan of traffic accidents. In Japan, as for total liability of traffic accidents, Japan has a special act named Act on Securing Compensation for Automobile Accidents. The act introduced strict liability of car users on death or bodily injury accidents and compulsory automobile liability insurance system. The compulsory automobile liability insurance has several features or limitations. It covers only death or bodily injury of third party. Its policy limit is 1.2 million yen, that is almost about $8,000 per injured victim, and 30 million yen, that is about $20,000 per death. Besides, its premium is the same or fixed for any insurance company, for any car, or for any person. It is not adjusted to the degree of risk or each insured. So because the compulsory automobile liability insurance covers only death and bodily injury of third party with low policy limits, risk of driving is insured partially. Therefore, most car users buy additional automobile insurance provided by private insurance companies, which covers all the risks uncovered by the compulsory automobile liability insurance. Policy limits of such voluntary automobile insurance can be set in contract, usually unlimited for at least for liability to the third party. Its premium is risk sensitive and is differentiated according to the risks of insured car, insured person, especially their history of accidents and so on. So Japan has such double insurance system in traffic accidents. So such system is a bit complicated and might be a characteristics of Japanese legal system about total liability in traffic accidents. So anyway, an insurance creates moral hazard incentives. So how to deal with the problem in the current regime in traffic accidents in Japan? As for car users who purchase only the compulsory automobile liability insurance, risk sharing is a countermeasure to moral hazard. Their risks in car driving are covered by insurance partially, and they must bear the risk of car accidents with the insurance, which can align car users' incentive to avoid traffic accidents with the insurance company's incentive. As for car users who purchase both the compulsory automobile liability insurance and the voluntary automobile insurance, risk-sensitive premium of the voluntary insurance can reduce moral hazard incentive. They must avoid increasing the premium, and then they should pay enough attention to keep safety driving. Besides, as for both, the fact that money cannot compensate for their loss of bodily injury is also important. as you know, in a traffic accident, car drivers may suffer bodily injury and feel great pain, which cannot be made up for by money. In this situation, people will avoid incurring such situation even if they have insurance, because insurers would pay only money. So what is the background of such countermeasures? At first, why does the compulsory automobile liability insurance adopt flat premium system? In my opinion, in my view, an increased premium under risk-sensitive system might cause a situation that low-income citizens cannot keep buying the compulsory automobile liability insurance. And they cannot drive cars because if they wanna drive cars, they must buy the compulsory automobile liability insurance. So this cannot be acceptable in political reason. In addition to that, the government may punish the risky drivers in criminal cases and or stripped of their driver's license. Next, on the other hand, what is the prerequisite of adopting risk-sensitive premium in the voluntary automobile insurance? That is that insurers collect and share car users' history of accidents with each other. They establish such system. In total, the current liability and insurance regime in traffic accidents is car users' primacy. Liability is concentrated in car users, and compulsory insurance must be bought by car users. So then the necessary precondition of this regime is that car users have control over themselves and their cars. But such precondition will disappear in CPS. Rather, developers and operators have control over the system they provide. So developers and operators' primacy is better. Then in Japan, some scholars and practitioners propose that propose to realize developers and operators' primacy in traffic accidents through keeping the current liability and insurance regime in traffic accidents in principle, paying compensation or insurance money from car users or insurers to victims at once, and claiming reimbursement from developers and operators to the car users and insurers. But that proposal is nonsense at all. There is no reason to remain involvement of car users because they don't have any information about the system and control over it. They just cause it wasteful costs. Besides, in this proposal, insurers don't have continuous relationship with developers and operators because the insurance contract partner is car users, not developers and operators. That means that they can acquire essential information for evaluating risk of systems from developers and operators continuously. Rather, our proposal is better. That is strict liability of developers and operators with enough assets or with comparative insurance for small firms. So then how should we design insurance in the Agile governance system? So the first issue is which is better, flat or sensitive premium. That is risk sensitive is better. At first, while the government doesn't have enough information about CPS, the developers and operators have a lot of information that can calculate the probability that their system could cause action. It's like that the insurers have a strong incentive to collect and share such data for adjusted premium. And secondly, the firms can distribute the cost of the premium among their customers. Even if the premium is increased a lot, they ought to bear the cost or should withdraw from the market. Finally, for the firms, money doesn't fully compensate for loss. Their loss is not paid and suffering, but simply the money that must be paid for the compensation to the victim. Then, finally, which is better insurance or public compensation system? As far as unknown risk, both public compensation system is better. Even the developers and operators don't have information about unknown risk. That causes difficulty in structuring insurance because of the lack of the data for calculating the premium. So therefore, insurance system might not work well, and the public compensation system is better for securing compensation to victims. So that is my presentation is finished.
Thank you very much. So now we both Kentaro and Tetsuya talks about insurance, and Kentaro asked Tatsu two questions. The first one is how to decide the pricing, and even if you adopt the public insurance, still you have to calculate the premium and pricing, and I mean how the insurance company can decide the price, or even how the insurance company can decide whether it was actually covered by the insurance, which is supposed to cover only unknowns. So this is that was first question. The second question was the commitment issue. So, Tatsu, would you like to answer?
I think the first question is just information sharing with the governments and their insurance company. That's correct. So the first of all, to prevent the moral hazard of the company which provides the insurance from the insurance company. The insurance company have enough information to calculate the risk premium. That is the most important point. And as Kentaro mentioned, so there is an information asymmetry between the company and insurance company so far. And so the government who collects the information through the DPA should provide some critical information with their insurance company to prevent such kind of risk. So I agree with you, and I will again share the slides. So actually, this the image does not contain about the insurance systems, but each premise that the information collected by the government will shared with the necessary stakeholders to improve the situation, and that is including the risk premium calculation of the insurance company. And the second point is actually, I think it is, I heard from the Singaporean colleague that they try to install the very sophisticated insurtech to monitor the rates of actual accident of the automated driving systems, for example. So the insurance company calculated the risk premium based on the information disclosed by the tech company. And then they started to monitor the actual operation of automated driving systems and examine how it works or not. And if the actual accident rate is higher than the expected one, then they raise the premium or something like that. So that is another technology to control the risk premium in terms of preventing the moral hazard. And so I think we can combine both invention to, operating the insurance systems better. That is my answer to the first question. And the second question is actually, I forgot.
That's a commitment issue. So the question is, so suppose the insurers try to raise premiums for their customers.
Okay, I understand. So but they may afraid
they lose customers, or simply a fund could be too big to pay.
And so there is actually not no risk, but a real risk remains. But as Tetsuya explained, and I actually skipped the explanation, but as Tetsuya explained, under our regime, only the small company has an obligation to purchase the insurance. And so in that case, I think that there is no such fear of the insurance company to lose the future clients or the companies to big problems. And so, and I think there's some actually, this is not, I think, the formal opinion from such kind of company, but there is some opinion from, informal opinion from the car industry that a huge industry now can operate as an insurance company as well. And so they can have to get profit in terms of this kind of activities because now they have to balance the risk and they have to, set the risk on the price of the car. And so this pricing is equivalent to the setting the risk premium calculation. And so through this kind of situation, they can, go well. So I think there is not so strong incentive for, so there is not strong incentive for of the large company for purchasing the insurance. So that is the situation. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for elaborating that part. Particularly, I'm very impressed by sort of like the distinction between small funds versus large funds. And I strongly believe that depending on the customer type, we should provide different insurances and even including the decision of whether purchasing insurance or not. So I totally agree with Tatsu regarding that part. So, maybe so that's my brief impression about Tatsu's answer.
And maybe try to answer the first question of
Kento. Yeah.
So I think that is very difficult question. So you mean, so actually this system is always connected to the other systems, and so some may take much risk and then try to reduce. And there is if the liability regime does not work well, then some salient operator or some salient developer may incur the huge risks, and they should compensate due to the free rider of other operators or developers. That is your concern, I mean. Right. That's my understanding. And so we would like to operate the collaborate street liability in first place. So actually, so that is, I think, that our system is very corrective one. So I think to control the risk that is generates by the interaction of each components, like the drone system and autonomous vehicle system may interact with each other and cause some risks. I think there is a main case, and if the automobile company always incur the risk, then the drone company may be a free rider. That is maybe your concern. And so in this case, I think that every relevant company first should impose the collective liability strictly. Then they provide the necessary information to the committee, and the committee may finally decide which the percentage of the liability or the amount of the damage. So that is my preliminary thought. But I'm not sure because there is many unknown actually, and so I'm not sure whether this regime works well or not. But I believe that to at least address the problem you propose and the nature of and given the nature of the risk generated by the CPS, I think this kind of regime is necessary to introduce. Yeah, that is my answer. Okay.
Thank you. So now we have only 10 minutes left, and I would like to open the floor for your questions, if you have any. Yes, please, Jane.
So, Tatsu, this is such an interesting paper, and you've tackled a really difficult issue in a very sophisticated way. So I have either a question or a challenge, and then I'm more skeptical than you are about whether it's a good idea to carve out unknown unknowns, because at the end of the day, that's endogenous. In other words, what's unknown will depend on how much the company invests in information. So I have an old paper on why America is wrong to predicate corporate liability on whether the corporation has control over the employees. Because once you say they're liable if they have control and not if they don't, American companies will turn everyone into independent contractors, which they did even in ridiculous situations, right? Because we incentivize them, and you're incentivizing companies not to know. Now, you could try to fix it by saying, well, if we know that it was unforeseen but foreseeable, we could fix that. Courts and regulators aren't in a position to do that, particularly if they have the burden of proof. So I think you want to seriously consider saying strict liability for everything. And you raise risk aversion, but I wonder, I don't know Japanese corporate law, but in American corporate law, with publicly held firms, you're not going to have risk aversion because shareholders are diversified. With closely held firms, you might have risk aversion, but if I were a closely held firm, I'd license the AI outside the firm, license it to the company goes bankrupt, I start again with a new company. I mean, you won't have risk aversion. So I just think I just encourage you to reconsider the unknown. And on the effectiveness of strict liability, it seems potentially very effective for things like autonomous cars, except for that whole small problem. If it's small, closely held firms, they just go bankrupt and wiggle out of it that way. But other uses of AI that are really disturbing people are uses in employment, for example, and in other types of situations. And there, my concern is the victim of the AI won't even know they were harmed by it. And so, or the harm is small enough. So it seems to me you may need to couple your system with both public and private enforcement, so that there's a regulator that can do the strict liability on behalf of a group, class actions, which is not common, and mandatory disclosure. Instead of incentivizing, people have the right, and that's why you may want public. So the public authority has the absolute right to get information on the AI. You don't want to give that to private companies. I'm just, because how do you get the information out and make sure that the public knows there was a harm?
Okay, so I'd like to answer to the first question of you. So I agree with you to some extent. So strict liability is mainly desirable, and I think the real unknown case is very limited and very difficult to identify correctly. And so our system try to evaluate each case by case. So once the risk is identified unknown, then this unknown is now known unknown. And so I think that this cycle is quickly it operates. Then we can address to some extent your concern. And I agree with you. We are very careful for applying the exemption systems based on unknown. And so, you are correct that there is the concern. But given the context of Japanese company is very important, I think, because the mentality of Japanese company is very risk averse actually. Because I think so far the reputation cost is very high for Japanese company. For example, Toyota actually tried to operate the autonomous vehicles in their Olympic Village. and caused very minor accident actually, caused by the people who cannot see very well, accidentally try to cross the road and very slowly operating the bus slightly hit him. But this case broadcasted very badly by the newspaper, and Toyota's was somehow forced to stop the whole operation of the systems. So in Japan, actually, the company faces many, harsh social sanctions. And so I think we should somehow incentivize or push them or encourage them to go forward. That is the Japanese situation actually. If we have Googles and we have methods or some other very, risk-taking company, risk companies,
law breaking.
yeah, then the picture may be changed. That is my observation. And to the second question, so please repeat. I forgot the second question. So.
The need for public enforcement and the need for
mandatory
information sharing because plaintiffs won't know that they're victims. Outside of autonomous vehicles.
Especially in discrimination case, I think our regime may not work well because this regime is established address for address for the autonomous vehicles or other they're very dangerous systems. And so the one possible solution is to introduce the whistleblowing systems to the company which provides the AI, for example, assistance for employment screening, something like that. Because actually in Japan, there is a case that some human resource agent company called Recruit introduced some AIs which tries to figure out who will quit soon or not. Of course, they don't disclose the information for the usage to the users of the site, and that becomes, of course, a very huge scandal actually. And I think this information is maybe released by the inner employee, by the company who think this is the wrong systems. And so I think if we set the whistleblowing systems and the company tries to and we set the same regime, then the company should care the risks which is not so apparent to the public to continuously address. And if not, then the whistleblowers may go to the authorities and get some bounties. And so I think introducing the whistleblowing systems with some bounty systems may work well to prevent such kind of or reduce such kind of problems. That is my observation. And mandatory disclosure is another option, but I'm not sure whether the information disclosed is actually authentic or not. So there is no hidden information or not. So we need another mechanism to make sure that the information is fully disclosed or something like that. So I think the whistleblowing system is another option. And mandatory disclosure information really help to operate and operate such kind of systems more healthier than now. Thank you.
So now we're running out of time, but if you have any additional question, maybe we can accept one more. Yes? Okay. So, and would you like to make any final comments or? Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for everything is super much complex. So all services are connected to the cloud services, data services, algorithm, operation systems, apps, and there are a lot of different stakeholders in the value chain. So how to get information from them, so who should be liable, or how to calculate the risks, everything is still unknown. But we can only learn from doing so. let's continue our journey. Thank you very much. Thank you.